James Forten was born in September of 1766 to parents who were free African Americans in the city at the time.
And it's important to make that note that Forten is born free. So he grows up seeing the rollout of this early American experiment. And he is right in its backyard of inception.
The late 18th and early 19th century Philadelphia witnessed an explosion of Black freedom. And when we think about the decades leading up to the beginning of the 19th century, we really see the numbers grow and expand. By the time they take the 1790 census, there were technically a little over 6,000 Black people living in and around Philadelphia. And by the 1830s, 1840s, that number would more than double. And what's most important is that in this moment when we're thinking about freedom and the birth of a new nation, the majority of those Black men and women were free. While we think about families like the Forten family, who had a history, generational history of freedom, they lived and worked and interacted with people who had experienced enslavement themselves, were attempting to extricate themselves from the spider web of slavery. But I think we have to ask the question, what does freedom mean when it sits alongside of slavery?
James Forten's sail-making business, it becomes one of the leading sail-making businesses in Philadelphia. And he becomes one of the wealthiest Philadelphians at the time, and one of the, if not the wealthiest African-American man in early 19th century America. James Forten, as an African-American man, is telling both Black and white workers what to do, what tasks to work on. It's pretty significant for the 1780s and 90s. James and Charlotte had a total of 9 children, 8 of whom survived to adulthood.
James Forten, he understood the importance of education and pushed for that at almost every turn.
Harriet Davy Forten and Sarah L. Forten receive a pretty robust education paid for by their parents.
For those of significant wealth, many of them chose to use private tutors. Private tutors, especially for young Black women, became a sort of marker of distinction, a marker of wealth. To be tutored in your home meant that you would be spared the indignities of racism, of segregation, of encounters on the street, on the way to school. And that education was, of course, steeped in reading, writing, but also things like sewing and watercolors and thinking and reading poetry.
Harriet and Sarah get married, and they marry brothers, Robert Purvis and Joseph Purvis, sons of a white man and a woman of color. Their father was a merchant, hence how he was able to acquire great wealth. The Purvis brothers chose to identify themselves as African American. Many people who met them thought they could pass as white.
There was a close bond between the Purvis family and the Fortens. This was not unusual for the time. These men and women often found themselves in the same locations, praying in the same churches, attending the same literary societies and events.
Robert Purvis became a leading abolitionist and an abolitionist writer. So Robert Purvis and Harriet Davy Forten Purvis are this power couple, in a way, of the abolitionist movement. This includes Robert Purvis's involvement in founding the American Anti-Slavery Society. Charlotte Van Dyne Forten and her daughters helped establish the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society. Sarah L. Forten, she's quite an accomplished poet as well, routinely publishing her poetry in The Liberator.
Founded by William Lloyd Garrison, which really was a political machine in itself, and pushed the nation to confront the injustice of slavery and the need to eradicate it in the most revolutionary of ways.
Harriet Davy Forten Purvis, during the Civil War years and just after, works with Octavius Catto trying to desegregate Philadelphia's trolley cars and streetcars. In the Civil War section of the exhibit, we're featuring the story of Robert Bridges Forten, James Forten's son, who enlisted in the 43rd Regiment of United States Colored Troops during the Civil War in 1864.
He is well past the age to enlist and could simply have sat on the sidelines and raised money for the United States Colored Troops, but who insisted on making that personal commitment and serving, and sadly would lose his life doing so.
As the United States is approaching its 250th anniversary of 1776, we can learn a lot from the Fortens and the way they dealt with challenges.
I believe that James Forten and many of the heroes of the Revolutionary period simply have not been the focus of a lot of more popular historical enterprises, which is one of the reasons why we're so happy to see this exhibit.
We want to emphasize, and especially with this exhibit, that telling diverse stories of the American Revolution tells a larger, more accurate story.
I can think of no sort of better place or ground zero to engage in the conversation about freedom and justice. So to me, this is a perfect exhibit and a perfect way to help us reorganize the narrative of history, of engagement, and to have all Americans find themselves in this story.